Yeah, new t-shirt. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today, I'm talking about the first two albums from Justice, Cross, and Audio Video Disco. Yes, I'm finally freaking doing this. Alright, so, the other day, these guys released their equivalent to Daft Punk's Alive 2007, Woman Worldwide. It's a live album that's mainly just mashups of all their old material from their three mainline albums so far, though unlike Alive 2007, the audience cheering is removed. Probably could have used it in there anyways. Now, like Alive 2007, I don't have a proper review of Woman Worldwide in me. It's really awesome to hear all these tracks mashed up with each other and work so well against each other, but I really don't have much else to say about it aside of that. That's kind of the problem with live albums like this. They're fun to listen to, but don't really deliver any discussion material. Which is why I figured this was a good opportunity to talk about their previous two albums, since, I mean, they are among the most requested albums to talk about I've ever gotten, even since I first started the channel over 3 years ago. May as well just get them out of the way, so this is a good time as any. I am being a little wary now, though. My review of their third album, Woman, it's one of my most popular reviews. It's also one of my more controversial ones, though, too. I guess because I don't think everything these guys have ever done is 10 out of 10 life-changing material, and the general consensus from fans of the band is that they're one of the greatest things ever to happen to music, bar none, and anyone who disagrees out to be burned at the stake and all the usual YouTube comment crap we've heard plenty of times before. Well, okay, the backlash against that review wasn't that bad, because some people did know how opinions work, and even so, I still said that I thought Woman was a pretty good, solid album with really only one track I wasn't feeling, Love SOS. And even if I didn't see myself putting the album on a regular basis, having gotten sick of it rather quickly with repeat listens, I still enjoyed it a ton on first listen, and on recent return listen as well. I mean, typically I only return to 2 tracks from that album, Safe and Sound and Chorus, which are freaking incredible. And the rest is at least pretty good, too. Just I often find Justice overbearing and the kind of thing that I need to be in a specific mood to really enjoy. They've never been a huge part of my life or the kind of thing that I listen to all the time. So enough recap on things I've said already. Time to properly review their other 2 albums and go into detail on them. So, I'll start with their debut, Cross. Or I guess it's self-titled now, apparently on Spotify and iTunes and all the other places, but I'm still calling it Cross. So, how to describe this album to someone who's never heard it, somehow? Well, okay, I know some people are gonna lose this shit at their comparison, because people got mad at this for whatever reason, but I guess Justice are in the same general ballpark as Daft Punk. I mean, some people say, oh, they're nothing like each other, they're both French, they both make house music, that's it, though. They're certainly not rip-offs or anything to that effect, but there is definitely some influence there. I mean, Justice built off the sound established by albums like Homework and Discovery, with a similar rough and aggressive aesthetic incorporating sounds of disco and 70s rock, but they did something entirely different with it. Cross, for instance, this is a lot more complex than anything Daft Punk ever did. Covered itself in glitchiness and edits all over the place, probably inspired at least in part by some of the styles explored by Mr. Wazo. They went for this colossal hugeness in their sound to try and elevate them to rock star status. Just completely go over the top in everything they did. They were basically trying to make their brand of dance music like a religious experience, as obvious of their use of the cross everywhere and using track titles like Genesis, Let There Be Light, and Waters of Nazareth. They sound like they were setting out to make dance music larger than life and just blow everyone out of the water. Cross was a statement of purpose to basically set the electronic music world on fire, and boy did they pull that off. Their fan base that worships them as an actual religion notwithstanding, even I can't deny this debut album is a dance music classic that changed the genre forever, and one that I wholeheartedly enjoy all the way through. Not a single weak moment to be found anywhere on here, like right from the very beginning when you're hit by the Ten Commandments style blaring horn sections leading into the jerky but absolutely irresistible Genesis. The album never lets up on intensity or danceability at any point. And all the tracks flow pretty smoothly into each other. Like, even though Genesis is a really fun track out of context, in context is also a great album intro, and as an intro to the next track, Let There Be Light. I'll admit Let There Be Light, I don't like it quite as much as Genesis. But it does sound like a worthy continuation of what we started with. Super abrasive, lots of distorted synths hitting the audio ceiling, but still creating memorable progressions. That said, the third track, D.A.N.C.E, is the track that first got me into Justice in the first place. I discovered it via the iTunes Essentials playlists, which I still miss and wish iTunes would bring it back someday, but it was a favorite of mine long before I finally got to hear Cross in its entirety. It brings in a lot of old-school disco elements with retro-sounding strings, super tight and funky bass lines, and really punchy pianos as well. Okay, the pianos were here earlier. Genesis had an awesome piano solo at 1.2, but I digress. But D.A.N.C.E has that, like, rough around the edges and hard-hitting production style of the rest of the album, and the chorus of what sounds like kids singing the lyrics here setting apart. One of the few times where the singing kid sounds good, like, really adds some personality here. I don't know if it actually is kids singing, it just sounds like that. Then we got Newjack, which is like a slice of great, glitchy future funk before future funk was a thing. Phantom and Phantom Part 2, which are a set of two more abrasive and over-the-top instrumentals, which are an absolute ton of fun, keeping me on the edge of my seat all the way through, or at least they would if they had kept me in my seat at all. I gotta get up and D.A.N.C.E, you know? Valentine, meanwhile, is the singular slow-down moment on this album, mainly driven by some progressions of Rhodes electric pianos and some sparkly synth lines on top. I mean, it sure as heck isn't Night Vision from Discovery, but it's still got some pretty hard-hitting percussion on it. But the attempt at giving you a break is at least appreciated, and I think this track is pretty dang underrated for what it's worth. Then we got two more personality-driven tracks after that. First, there's or just The Party in the recent reissue, which is not as fun to title, featuring the female rapper Uffy, who sounds kind of like a little kid, but clearly isn't, actually, given how she's talking about getting drunk and freaky. This also isn't one of the more well-loved tracks on here, and I've seen a number of people mark this one as their least favorite on the album. But I personally have to disagree with those people. I mean, I like Uffy's presence on the track and her chorus of, "Let's get this party started, right?" It makes the track one of the catchier tracks on here. So yeah, that's a good one. Oh, great lawnmower. Sorry for the lawnmower. After this, we got DVNO, which has some other guy who I suppose is actually called DVNO on it, singing. I mean, I can't understand 90% of what he's saying since the beat drowns him out. But I understand most of the chorus. DVNO for capital letters. Okay, he's not a great singer, but the beat does really sell him being this really cool guy. Don't need to ask his name to figure out how cool he is. I imagine him wearing one of those rock star jackets with the frills on it, and then on the back it just says like DVNO printed on it, printed in gold. And then after that we got the last three tracks, which all fit together pretty seamlessly. Stress is probably the best of the three, with the dramatic, almost movie trailer-like strings on it, still having the hard-hitting dance beats and including a little harpsichord sound solo on it near the end. But then we get Waters of Nazareth, which is easily the most abrasive track on the whole album. Admittedly not really my thing as much as the others. The abrasiveness and all the synth sounding particularly damaged and run through so much distortion filters, it can be a bit much for me. But it also has a pretty badass organ on it at one point. I mean, I guess it's my personal pick for least favorite because this kind of thing not playing much to my taste. But I'd still be lying if I said I didn't think this was a good track, and I know a lot of people are going to heavily disagree with that being my pick. It's kind of one of the big singles and all that. And finally, the closer, 1 Minute to Midnight, isn't really a big standout sound-wise. It brings in a bunch of sounds we've already heard on the album previously, and mainly characterized by this squonking bass synth. Also ends a bit abruptly and makes me think, oh, what, we're done already? Well, that seemed to go by pretty quickly. But it's still just as fun and danceable as all the previous tracks, even if not the most satisfying possible ending you could have picked. And that's all I have to say about Cross from an individual track basis. Even my least favorite tracks from this thing, I can't deny, are still pretty damn good across the board. It's one of the most seamless and well put together and fun and unique and personality-filled albums in all of dance music. And as for a rating, I'll admit I think most people are going to think I'm giving it way too low of a score than it probably deserves. But like I said, this isn't a life-defining album for me, personally. I still think it's freaking great, but it's not the kind of album that I put on super frequently. I typically listen to it like once at a time when I'm in the specific mood for it, then move on to something else and I don't think about it for another few months. Listening to a lot of Justice in a short amount of time will make me get sick of them pretty dang quickly and start finding their sound overbearing. But, you know, that's just me. I know this album changed the lives of so many people watching this, and I still absolutely give it my recommendation as an essential listen in this genre. So yeah, Cross it's an 8.3 for me. It's a great album. Check it out. But now we gotta talk about their follow-up in 2011, Audio Video Disco. Okay, I discussed my general feelings on this album in my review of Woman, and I assume that's where most of the dislikes on that video came from, but to reiterate, to me AVD is just an okay album, and one that didn't really live up to its full potential. And I also do want to make it clear, it's not like the ideas that went into it brought it down for me. This is an album that embraced a bunch of cliches of 70s rock and metal, some of which weren't really my thing. I mentioned before that I heard bands like AC/DC were probably an influence on this album, and I've never cared for AC/DC, personally. Even before my brothers decided it'd be funny to wake me up by blasting Back in Black in my ears at full volume, like I said in the Woman review. AC/DC were never my thing in the first place, even before that, but I digress. Coming back to it, I don't really feel the AC/DC influence that strongly on this album. This album still sounds like Justice, and the 70s rock stuff doesn't clash with their style. No, I think this album's biggest problem is just production and mastering, which is inconsistent as hell, and often really tinny and flat. Good chunks of this album needed more bass to give it some more of that visceral rush that Cross had, and probably a whole bunch of tweaking on the mastering side in general, just everything. It often makes this album feel like a watered down and less unique version of Cross, and I almost never actually put this one on myself in spite of having more than a few tracks that I really like on it. It's not a terrible album by any stretch, heck, it was definitely savable if you ask me. If it were remastered properly, it'd be brought up to a slightly weaker but at least worthy follow-up to Cross. And I think that's actually what Woman pulled off, even though I got sick of that one even more quickly than usual with repeat listens. I will give you that one at least sounds really good across the board. That one got the mastering done right. But AVD, to me, it's just a mixed bag with a lot of potential that isn't fully delivered on. So individual tracks. It starts with Horsepower, which is a decent enough copy of Genesis that at least sounds alright, but is nowhere near as good as the actual Genesis. It's an alright, if predictable, intro. Civilization, though, I cannot deny that's a great track. Already basically immortalized by a certain Billy Mays-related YTPMV I used to watch back in the old days. The original track here is even better. Got a catchy chorus that gets me to sing along with it, pretty good production all around as well. Not really much else to say about it, besides it's just a classic Justice track through and through. The beating of a million drums, the fire of a million guns. Anyways, unfortunately, after this is where the album really starts sliding off for me. I've never cared for Ohio, just kind of a slow-moving slog with mediocre singing on it, and while the old-timey 60s keyboards are a nice touch, the production seems really out of whack and makes an already not that satisfying track feel like a fraction of what it could have been. I usually want to just skip over this one, not a very fun one to me. It does come back a little with Canon. This is an instrumental that isn't that far a cry from 1 Minute to Midnight with some cool Human After All-esque bass lines. That's a really fun track that sounds pretty nice too. And On is an excellent track as well, really hard-hitting rock thing. Even if the singing is subpar, the catchiness and energy of the track makes up for it. Reminds me a lot of Kashmir by Led Zeppelin in many parts too. But then you get Brian Vision, which first of all is as blatant a Giorgio tribute as you can get. Which I approve of in theory, but this was one where the production specifically brought the track down. Because the sound of Brian Vision just does not hold a candle to Giorgio's actual work, like his own track, Evolution, or on Donna Summer's I'll Feel Love. Clearly made up of the same sounds, but it's just a weak sauce replica of what the guy himself could achieve. Sorry, but Giorgio by Marauder, this ain't. And Parade also at least had a good sound and idea behind it, with a punchy pianos as the bass and the We Will Rock You percussion and Mellotron-esque sounds on top that sound kind of like King Crimson or Yes inspired. It's good composition-wise, but again, the production is just not up to snuff. The pianos as the bass line lose their punch after a while, and the Mellotron stuff is way too high in the mix. It ends up sounding shrill and harsh when I really don't think it should. This had the potential to be a really good track, but they just dropped the ball in the production, like I keep saying. Though finally the album picks back up on New Lands, another classic rock style thing that doesn't sound all that much like Justice, but the hooks are all good and the production is perfectly serviceable for what they're going for. Definitely one of the bigger highlights on here. Kind of reminds me a little of that song, Your Love by The Outfield. I don't want to lose your love tonight. That one. And Helix is another future funk-esque instrumental like Newjack that's plenty of fun. I think it might even be about equal to Newjack quality-wise, another big highlight for me. And finally, the closer and title track. In contrast to Cross, which ends on a serviceable but ambivalent note, the title track here is probably the best track in the bunch. Fast-paced, catchy, driving, hard-hitting, well-produced, climactic. It's an excellent ending to this album that I'm not sure if we even fully deserved. Like, also hearing it on Woman Worldwide matched up with Chorus was absolutely perfect. I don't really have much else to say about it. It's just a track that gets a visceral reaction out of me that the rest of the album doesn't quite get to, yet still fits perfectly well within the track listing. And also I gotta talk about bonus tracks. On some versions, the title track has this long pause and then you got a hidden track called Presence, which is a slow burn instrumental, including some medieval-sounding flutes a la Stairway to Heaven or Yeses I've Seen All Good People. I think it's alright, didn't emotionally move me or anything, but didn't outright bother me either. And if you get the iTunes version of AVD, you instead get the 17-minute 4-part epic piece called Planisphere, which, holy crap, where to start with this thing? I mean, it's basically based around the same repeating melodic riffs over and over through the whole thing, played on different instruments. But they keep you interested the whole time, with buzzing bass lines, synth-wavy futuristic sections, before synthwave was really a thing yet, rock-heavy sections with acoustic drums and guitar solos, gothic church music-y sections, and dramatic pianos, this weird chopped-up pitch-down rapping. There's so much to this track that keeps you absolutely captivated the whole time, yet always sounding like the kind of thing that only Justice could do, and not, trying someone else's style. One problem I guess it has, though, is that if you do stick it at the end of AVD, instead of bringing the rest of the album up with easily its best produced and most interesting and impressive piece, Planisphere instead just highlights how subpar the production is on the rest of the album, because the actual production here is a huge step up. If you go back and listen to something like Brian Vision right after it, it becomes blatantly obvious how much potential AVD had as a whole if they didn't drop the ball on the mixing basically across the board. Yeah, audio-video disco is a very frustrating lesson, I gotta say. I will say that I've come out saying mostly positive things on the songs themselves. I like the ideas that go into them, and the melodies and hooks are on point. I certainly get the appeal of the album and will understand if someone marks it as their favorite Justice album, but it desperately needs to be remastered before I can give it my full thumbs up. To me, this was kind of a letdown after Cross, and even if it has gotten better with repeat listens, I can't fully excuse it or say it's anything above okay for me. So yeah, audio-video disco is a 6.7 for me, sorry. But yeah, those are all my opinions on Justice. Of course, this is all just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it. If Audio Video Disco is your favorite Justice album, that's cool, I get it. I disagree. But I'd like to hear your thoughts and rants or whatever. Leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. If you want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.